Hello, 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 hello. How's everybody doing? So I hope everybody's having an awesome Sunday wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing. This is 50 Pips, 9th of November, 2014. Not making any trade calls or recommendations because you and only you are responsible for the trades you may decide to take. And the fact that you're listening to this means you've read, you understand, you accept all the disclosure disclaimers on the blog, understanding that we're just performing some technical analysis in a learning context for educational purposes only. So what's going on, guys? Let's see what's happening here. How's the week setting up? So I think one of the, in terms of the data calendar, we got the CPIs coming out of China on Monday, then Tuesday, fairly light day. We've got some bank holidays in Canada, in the U.S., in France. So I mean, just keep that in mind. I think in the U.S. it's Veterans Day, so basically it's just the bond market that's closed, and then we got the Kiwi, so RBNZ is going to be out with a financial stability report. Wednesday, Wednesday's probably the most interesting day because we've got all that stuff, the claimage count, and Carney speaking with the inflation report out of the UK. So that's really going to be a big day for sterling. Then Thursday, we got some stuff out of China again and some unemployment claims out of the US. And then we go into some of the GDPs on Friday. But really, it's not a super interesting week. There could be some stuff going on, but it's not like a really heavy week like the past week. Now, what to keep in mind? Well, after the closes, you'd expect to see some kind of follow through tonight in the Sunday Open. So what does that mean? You'd expect to see USD CAD try and trip some stops to the downside. That's the same thing for USD CHF. You'd expect to see, especially the commodity currencies, try to trip some stops. So, Aussie, Kiwi try to trip some stops to the upside, and so forth, so forth. So let's see what's happening. Let's go through the charts. Let's do some futures and let's do some Forex. Okay, so let's start with the futures. So let's start with the ES. What's going on the ES? I'll tell you what, instead of looking at these charts, because you can see the charts are pretty much all posted on the blog, let's just look at some blank charts, right? Just to move things up a bit, shake things up a bit. So what's going on here? So clearly ES is holding bid, right? The big issue is we expected it to try and fail from a higher level. So there's been some nice little reversals at highs, right? When we put in these highs, we had a little move here on this negative close back down. We got a chance to trade this to the short side. A much nicer move here. That was a very aggressive move down, which retraced all the way back up here, tried to get some moment to the downside, and not a lot's going on. So as far as we're concerned, no big change. We said, unless there's a big change in policy, we'd still expect us to continue to grind higher. And we've been talking about those 2050s as a psychological level to the upside, probably be attracting, and that's what we would be looking for this to slowly grind forward. I think a lot of people will be looking at levels just ahead of that, either whether they're looking at some kind of fib extensions or if they're looking at some kind of, this trend line that's probably coming in the high 2040s. But keep in mind that there's going to be a lot of interest most likely to try and fade once we start get above there. But I suspect maybe a lot of people are just saying, well, this probably has to fail from higher levels. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy because the bigger shorts are going to wait to hit it closer to that 2050. So it might just naturally go back, just vacuumed all the way back into there. So I think what I'll be watching going into the week is, again, 2040s into those 50s is that next psychological level, and basically see if these lows here, which is pretty much the 2000 level all the way into those previous highs here, which is basically the 2000 into 2010, is that going to continue to hold as previous resistance acting as support? So as long as that supports, I'd expect us to see this continue to grind higher. If that gives, we might see a little retracement, but I think the path of least resistance is probably still higher. And if we fail, I'd like to see a bit of a failure, but I think we probably have to fail from higher levels, right? And if you're looking at other charts in terms, let's just do one more of the equity size. What should we do? Let's do NASDAQ. NASDAQ's fairly similar here. I think a lot of people, if you look at this on the weekly, right, you have that last move back into those highs that held the 61.8, pretty much the pip. So a lot of people will be looking at this to continue to make its way back into those 42 77s pretty much. And right here, the question is going to be, you know, as long as we continue to hold these previous highs and as long as this whole area continues to act as support, well then most likely the path is going to, least resistance is going to be to continue to try and grind there. On any move back, you know, I'd look at those dips back down that got bid before, maybe to give some kind of support. But you know, that's pretty much the way this is looking across the board on these equities. Gold, what's going on gold? If you look at gold, we had some interesting action. So basically, we start to move very, very aggressively. And, you know, we said if we start to get closes back below those 1175s, this will probably start to trade very, very heavy. And we could see a long, very big acceleration to the downside. Now, what's happened on the week, you know, whether it's a miracle or not, we don't care. We just focus on the levels. And what's happened is you see that basically we got some buyers coming in and right back above that 1175, right? So the big question is this a little fake out at those lows, and is it time to see a little rally in gold? It definitely looks like that. You know, if you're looking in terms of candle pattern, in terms of action, it looks like it'll probably try and take some stops out to the upside into the open on Sunday. And, you know, the big question is, how do we trade here? Keep in mind that as long as, you know, whether you're looking at it on the weekly or whether you're looking at it on this daily, you know, you have to respect Friday's move is very aggressive back above those 1175s. You know, globally speaking, unless we make it all the way back, you know, back above this descending trend line and the 1250 level we've talked about for a long time, right, which is being pivotal, it's still going to be pressure on, right? So that 1250 still remains the big bull bear line defending that 1200 and 1300, but right now it looks like it might try and take a stab. So again, keep an eye on that 1200, but as long as it holds back above these 1175s, then it looks like we might see a bit of a press back higher. Again, we'll have to see what the equities do, but you know, next level 1200 again, which is previous resistance, now acting as support, but as long as it holds above here, it'll probably try and take a bit of a stab higher. Keep in mind, no change. Weekly closes back below this 1175 is probably going to trade very, very, very heavy. Okay. And last but not least, let's do the crude and what's going on crude. So on crude, we talked about the fact that, you know, I'm not going to go through it again about the 80 into 70 zone pretty much, right? And the fact that as much as this was a very aggressive move down, we looked at the 80, 75 and 70, you know, we said, you know, as soon as we start coming in this zone, you'll get people talking about all kinds of conspiracy theories. You'll get people talking about, you know, the cost of production, etc. But if it's going to bounce anywhere, we'd expect it to bounce inside this zone. At this moment, I think we'll have to see how this behaves. It looks similar to gold, that it's trying to bounce a bit. It's still holding it heavier than gold. So really, for me to say that we're really pressure off here for a little bounce, I need to see it trading back above the 80s. I need to start seeing daily closes back below the 80s. So again, we might still need to probe a bit lower before we actually start to pop a little bit. But these are the levels I'm keeping an eye out on crude. Okay, so that's pretty much what we're focused on. Same chart is on the blog. Let's do some of the commodity currencies. What's going on USD CAD? So if you remember last week on USD CAD, I kept on going on about on Twitter about the 114, saying it's all about the 114 level, and what we were focused on was the daily chart, right? Once we move back up, we said, you know, that 114 seems to be pulling. It seems to be the beam pulling. Looks like we need to take stops at 114, and then we can play again, see if it's time for a healthy retracement or not. It's all about how we behave around those 114s. And what was interesting for us around those 114s was this daily candle, right? Because we came right back up, bam, cleared all the stops after an attempt to try and hold, but we couldn't. And then that was the range that was put in, right? So what we were saying is, okay, we get a daily close back above those highs. This is going to be very, very bullish, probably continue higher in extensions. Back below 114s, this is heavy, but we really need to clear that day's lows to get some traction to the downside. And that's exactly what we got, you know. So nice shorting opportunity here with looking for those highs to hold, very aggressive move back down. Now, the big question is how we behave into the beginning of the week, right? Now you can look at this in a number of different ways. You know, you can put a number of different um, channels up. You know, there's a lot of way to the downside, and this will still hold an upward channel. What I'm focused on really is if you look at it from a weekly perspective, right? You can see these highs that were defended very aggressively, right? So those highs are pretty much coming in at around the 1220 zone. So what I would suspect here going into the week is that the market will likely try and continue as we go into the week to press to the downside, cause a bit more damage to the downside. But really, to see the next aggressive move to the downside, we need to start getting daily closes below there, right? So if on any weakness here we can get traction below these 113s, then I think the 112s are be calling. Only below there would we see probably aggressive moves coming in, maybe calling for the 111s, 110s, but that will likely be the bull bear line to the downside of the week around those 1200s, 112, 112.20, right? And right here, you know, it's all about how we behave now at Friday's range. If we hold below, likely continue to trade a bit to the downside. And this is something that we'll likely see across the board, right? So even if you're looking at Aussie, what's going on Aussie? So we get a very aggressive push down. We had this whole base that was trying to hold very aggressively. Price was trying to rotate back out of this zone, and bam, we got the breakdown, very aggressive selling, right? So here, even if you just look at it, you know, very classic previous resistance becoming support. You've got all this previous support rather, right? And now it's coming back in. So is that going to act as resistance, right? So as long as this breakdown zone holds, right? As long as it holds, and as long as you see price trading below these 86.30s, right? You probably see price try to take an aggressive stab back at those lows. But if I suspect, you know, we'll try and take stops up to the upside and try and get some traction above these 86.30s into the open on Sunday, right? You'd expect to see this try and make a run for those 87.60s, maybe even for the gap fill if it gets traction early in the week. But, you know, clearly pressure remains on. So it's just a question of, is it going to get a bit of squeezy action? How long is that action going to last, and what's going to happen? But really, we'll have to see how flows and how the market respond going into the beginning of the week. And that's pretty much what's going on across the board. You know, even if we look at this Kiwi, similar thing, right? We've got that previous support that broke, but you see how we're back trading above it, right? So the fact that we're trading back above it, I think you know, there's clearly a chance of a bit more of a move to the upside, right? Until we start to clear these whole, you know, these 78.30s, there'll still be pressure on, right? It'll have to continue. It will have to take out this series of lower highs to change and possibly look for a move back into the high range. So pressure is still going to be on, but it looks like it still has some room to go to the upside, right? What else have we looked at? Let's look at let's do euro and cable, right? Now everybody wants to look at euro and cable. So what's going on euro? Euro here, very aggressive move down. We pressed down on the weekly, right? We talked about the fact that it was clearly once below, we were below the 125s, and we had that 124.60 as support. It was going to continue to hold heavy, right? Now I suspect, I think it's on this chart, if memory serves, I think everybody and their grandmother and their hamster is looking at the 200. Is it on here or is it on cable? I can't remember. I'm not a huge fan of these, but no, it's probably on cable on the weekly. There's the 200s just below on cable. So here, you know, the way I'm looking at this is just, you know, it's all these whole previous supports here that are holding the pressure on now, that are acting as resistance. And as long as price holds below there, it's likely going to be very difficult for this to rally. But the way this is trading, the way this is traded on Friday, it looks like it's got some room to the upside here. Now the big question is, and I think, you know, the focal point is really going to see, you know, what happened on all these breakdowns, and similar to Kiwi and Aussie, you know, it needs to hold this whole series of lower highs, right? As long as it continues to hold that, pressure is going to be back on, and we could easily see a little a retracement back into those highs, but most likely the market will continue to want to sell into those levels, right? So it's just a question of how we trade. It looks like we'll see a bit of an extension of the moves we had on Friday early in the week, and then do they get traction or not? You know, The trend is, for, you know, the most recent trend would be for the expectation would be for them not to get traction, but that's what every single person is expecting. So there might be a little bit of a surprise. Interim here, right? Keep an eye. Those previous lows, previous support is likely going to be acting as resistance. If we can continue to hold below there, then likely it will trade very, very, very heavy. If it gets back above there, then expect to see a press higher to go back into that descending trend line, or that area at least, okay? So what's going on cable? Let's see if 50's memory is good, or if I've completely lost it. So you know, here we go here. Oh, it's just not that. It's probably on the monthly. I think I was pretty sure it was on euro. So let's go back on euro just to see if it was, if the 200 was on that euro on the monthly. Okay, there it was. I thought it was on euro. It's not on the weekly, it's on monthly. So keep in mind on euro, everybody's looking at this, right? So that's why you'll probably see a lot of people calling 120 levels, something like that, saying, you know, it has to touch because that 200 on the monthly is really attracting. You know, I'm not too focused on that. I'm just looking at this whole previous support, and that's what's going to be attracting. I mean, if that happens, the 200 happens to come into there, so it's some kind of confluence. But again, I'd much rather look at previous levels than look at a moving average, right? So let's get back to cable. What was going on cable? So cable, we can get rid of this. Well, incidentally, below the 200 on the weekly, so holding heavy, right? So the big question is, how do we behave and how do we act? You see here, we've got this whole previous low here when we gapped up, and then bam, we held this this support right here. That's really going to be a key area to keep an eye out for going into inflation report and Carney, right? You see what's happening. So basically this was this all support here that we probed below. So we lightly took out some weak players with light stops below that zone. But that's really what I would be focused here going early on the week. You know, if we hold below this area, then you'd expect to see market try and take a stab lower and cause some more pain. You've got these previous here, these previous highs coming in at 57.40s, right? A lot of people are going to be looking at this move from lows to highs, and you know, you've got that 61.8 coming in around that level pretty much. So that's all going to be an interesting zone. But as long as we come into the week here and we start holding above these 58.50s, right, then do not be surprised to see some profit taking, some people taking some off the table going into Carney, right? And we could easily move all the way back into those 61s, 62 range. You can see it here, right? You had a lot of wheeling and dealing, a lot of sellers trying to fight it out here into these 61.90, 62s, you know, so that's pretty much the chops range, right? So if we hold below into the open heavy, if not, we could easily see a little retracement back up here. It doesn't really change a lot. It just means some of the shorts are taking profits going into the week, right? So again, there's not an awful lot of data, but there's clearly the chance for a lot of movement going into this week, simply because a lot of the pairs are extended, right? And it would be healthy to see some kind of retracement. And I think with a lot of people betting against these retracements, some people could get caught off guard, especially the beginning of the week, and maybe some of the moves may be exaggerated. So let's see what happened. Let's keep an eye on the calendar, keep an eye on the holiday calendar, keep that context in mind, and let's see how things shape up. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, see you guys around on Twitter. Thanks for listening. Have an awesome one. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye, guys.